Okay. What I like to do right now is actually going more into the practical side of things, explain more in detail
Recording in progress.
how the whole stuff actually sits together. And first of all, because we still have a bit of sunlight, even so that it's quite cloudy right now out there, I'd like to show you very quickly why you probably want to use the new Creative Grading solution. I mean, Dane already mentioned it. There are so many things which we need to take care of, so many functions and features which you need to control simultaneously. And the challenges, we have a lot of functions these days hidden and buried deep inside menu structures. No matter if you take an OCP 400 from Grass, if you take an RCP from Sony, or an ROP from Pana, or you just take any control solution you will find these days outside. The basics you will find always on the surface, but any other feature you always need to hit the menu button and go deep inside the menus. And that's our biggest challenge today, because we need to keep our eyes on the road. We need to actually look on the screen and don't distract ourselves by jumping into menu structures. And how easy that can be, I like to show you on this video over here. So what you actually see right now is we do have a live picture. And in fact, if I'm opening and closing the iris, you see something is happening here. So on the control panel, as Dane already mentioned, we've got plenty of controls which are configured in a certain way. And I will explain how that all works in a few minutes. But I want to control my camera right now, pretending I'm in the production, and I need to drive the camera. So for instance, I can just zoom in and actually do focal stuff over here right now, you see, and with only one button click and not even looking on the panel really, I can jump to another page to control HDR related settings and SDR related settings. Okay, my PC starts doing his lovely thing again. So you see here, HDR high, HDR gamma low, for instance. And then I need to change the color temperature slightly, so I can do all of this kind of things without actually jumping into any submenu. Don't get me wrong, that was all possible in the past already with previous control solutions. So it's not like that this is new. The big game changer over here is that we do not need to go into any menu structure and actually try to find the solutions or the functions and features we want to control and want to change. Okay, let's start from scratch. We see over here two control panels, and I will immediately dive into some of the basics to understand how the whole system works. And what we do have here, then am I somewhat fluent, or is it?
Yeah, you are freezing up a little bit, but it's still okay. One of these days we're gonna have to buy you a new computer.
yes, please. Good. So as said already, we do have our control solutions over here, and obviously I do have a tablet in my hand, so I could drive the cameras actually from my tablet. And the very first thing which I like to share with you is how to connect a tablet to the system. Obviously, you need to either have a Wi-Fi connection to the network where your camera sits in. I'm talking on the public side. Or you actually need to have a wired connection out of a tablet. If you open the application, the first thing you will see is actually that you need to enter a IP address. Like always, I need to install a quick plugin, and this will come back. So let me see.
seems odd that thing keeps needing to be reinstated. That's very weird.
Yeah, I know. It's probably because I don't have a full version of Zoom anymore, because I don't have my own profile. So if everything's fine, you should see my tablet right now. And in fact, what you see is, here you see that's my tablet. And when I hit on this creative grading icon over here, it opens up the creative grading software, which is an application which is running on iOS or Android devices. And as you can see, it actually gives me a warning which says that it can't connect to the CCS1. So the way to do this is on the top right, you see this little tooth wheel. If I click on that one, I then get an indication over here about the IP address, and I just need to go to the IP address, and I need to bring in the right IP address. In my particular circumstances, it's actually this IP address. So when I hit the ready button or enter button, or in German fertig button, then actually it just comes back here. And a lot of people get confused because they were expecting that something more happens. What you need to do is you need to press the back button. That's important. So on the top left, you see back. And when I click on the back button, you will discover it actually comes up. And here we do have controls. And as you can see, I do have a camera number 5 over here already. And this camera number 5, I can now drive from my tablet. For instance, I can drive the Iris. This drives me nuts. Huh?
Well, right now we're just seeing the tablet full screen, so we don't see what's happening really.
Yeah.
Outside of the fact that the numbers aren't changing.
Yeah. So, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So let's switch over to the other side. Now you should see me.
Yeah.
And you should also see the image. And if I'm just taking my tablet and I'm driving, for instance, the Iris, but I could technically do literally any function and feature. So in an entertainment environment or production environment where you actually need to engage with engineering and lighting and all of the creative people, that's what Dane actually mentioned earlier. So instead of us engineers sitting in the dark room somewhere far away from the truth, you can now take this thing, walk front of house or walk into the studio and actually see the set, see the real world, and actually look to the screen, which is next to the DOP or first cameraman or light director, however this is called, this device, this guy or lady. And you can really see, I see now, I understand. So I can actually dial in a little bit about the color temperature to actually make the whole thing, and I can dial a little bit about HDR related settings. You don't see this, but I'm doing it right now with my tablet so that I can, for instance, drive in a little bit the stuff over here to actually make this looking more appealing, as an example, to really match the real life idea. And then I'm walking back into my control room, and here the story really starts. So that's just to give you an idea. And now I need to explain you how this all sits together. And you see, I've got my tablet here. So I've got one instance running here, but the instance you actually see is empty. There's no camera 5. You see over here, that's all empty. While here, I've got a camera 5 and I've got a camera 6. So what I want to say with this is you do have the ability to have as many instances as you like. It's not limited to only one. Like in the old days, you can have one MSU, you can have one MCP. As soon as you want to have more for a large production environment, for instance, big OB truck or things like this, you normally screw it because you can have as many control panels, but you can only have one MCP or MSU. So with our solution right now, you can have as many as you like, right? So the idea here is that each operator controlling 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cameras with these panels should have one of these instances in front of him on a PC display, on a tablet, as a multi-viewer tile, however this can be physically done in the studio or production environment. When we log into the system, so when we get in front of the system, it could look like this. And as you can see, even the control panels, they have no control, because at this moment, there is physically nothing assigned all over the place. You see, totally empty. As Dane already mentioned, yes, I can drive the cameras without a CCS1. It's not recommended though, because we're missing a lot of cool features and the ability to actually change the configuration. But if I just need to drive that camera here, I can go into a menu and, like on the OCP 400, select a camera number. So let's go here and select number 5. And here I go. So I have my control. But this way of doing the assignment is a thing of the past. And why, I will explain now. Coming back to the application. This application over here, by the way, runs on a browser. In fact, this is a Firefox browser, which I'm using. It can be Chrome, it can be any type of browser which actually supports HTML5. And I logged into the system. And the first thing you will discover when you look into this, there is an icon which is called user profile. I click on this user profile, and what you see, it comes up with quite a large amount of different things. But apart from Kevin and apart from Winston, there are actually no names, like operator names. Even Dane and myself, and I would actually say literally everyone in the world, get the idea wrong first place. So everyone starts actually saying, I am a new operator, so I am actually John, right? So let's create my own username and my own user profile. Here's the point. This user profile is determined which cameras and which creative grading panels are tied together. It's not about how this panel is physically configured, so how the buttons are working and all the other stuff. That's coming later. So the idea is, remember, we do have, for instance, in a larger OB truck, we do have, for instance, 3 shader positions. And what I can do is I can create a show, for instance, for a soccer, shader position 1, and if I hit on this one here, and I hit the select icon, you see it's now automatically selecting camera 5, camera 6, 1, 2, 4, and 3. So it don't have to be in a sequence number. It can be randomly selected, right? And if I'm logging into shader position number 2, I have totally different numbers. So for instance, if I'm in a studio environment, I can very, very quickly jump from studio 1 to studio 2 without physically moving away from this desk. So I can be extremely agile in assigning the cameras to my control solution. That is the idea about the user profile. However, when I log in here, I actually don't have any camera right now. So the next question would be, how do I actually figure out and how do I actually select the cameras I want to control? At the very bottom right, there is an icon, which is actually the camera and control panel assignment button. When I hit on this button, then this page comes up, which first of all gives me the camera CGP assignment, right? So there is no other assignment over here. There is only the assignment of my cameras and my creative grading panels. The lower half is creative grading panels. The upper half is the cameras. So if I want to have a camera control, I want just assign a camera here. I click on plus, and it brings up a pop-up which shows me all available cameras in my network. That means all of the cameras which are physically enabled, slash all XCUs which are already there. It might be that someone is still running some SMPTE cables towards the cameras, but the XCUs, so our CCU, Grass Valley XCUs, are already existing with their respective camera number. In my particular case, I select camera number 5, and you also see we can actually bring in names, so alias names. In my circumstances, I want to control Frank, but in fact his camera. So it directly shows me camera number 5. There is an LDX100 connected to this, and there is a UXF XCU connected. So I can directly see that my kit is completely up and running. There is a camera, there's an XCU, I'm good to go. And in fact, if I just go out here, you see I've got my camera, I've got some data over here. I still don't have any control here. We will come back to this, but I can go in here, for instance, and I can drive the Iris, right? I can do it from here, or I can change an ND filter, right? So this can all be done already. Fair enough. Let's get some more cameras in. So I also select camera number 6. I need this camera for showing off some features over here. And you see this is an LDX-C for compact 98. And C means nothing else that the C series cameras normally never have any XCU. In fact, they don't have an XCU at all. And I also have a point of view camera, which is not yet there. So I want to dial in the number. I know it will probably pop up later on when the guys are ready with running the cables. So you can also go in here and just type in a number. So 55 as an example. So I pre-configured camera 55. It means as soon as the camera would come alive, it would be available over here also to be controlled. So that is all I have done with my camera assignment, and I can now drive these 2 cameras. And how that all works, we talk about in a minute. But still, I want to control it from here. So how do I actually assign my control panel now to my CGA, Creative Grading Application instance? And that is also done in the submenu over here. So when I click on here again, I need to select my panels over here. So I hit the plus button and it shows me a little info. Don't do the mistake, like I have seen many, many times, that people try to push the single button on the screen of the tablet or the screen of the PC. Yet, you need to press the button over here. Follow my finger. And you see, I'm coming all the way down here. So I've got the single, the preview, and a multi button, similar to what you see on the application. And when I press this button now, 1, 2, 3, it actually assigns this panel to this application. In the moment I do this, you will discover that all of these buttons light up. You see over here, no buttons lit except the free button. But all of the other buttons actually going nowhere. They're not controlling anything. While if I'm pressing anything here, you see the application is following as soon as my PC is getting alive again. Good. So this is actually the assignment of a control panel to the application. Still, this panel, the second one, is still not configured. And as you can see here, and that's also a little bit about troubleshooting, There is no camera number, while here we've got camera number 5. So there is no camera number. We will not control any camera. But there is this little icon over here, which you can also see here. And that means that this creative grading panel, as well as this, do actually recognize that there is a CCS1 in my network. And by the way, you might have recognized this is also over here, right? So if I want, I can try to switch off quickly the connection to show you how it would look like if the CCS1 is not there. Give me a second. Oh. Mhm. Okay. Yeah, that works perfect. My PC is frozen. Can you still see me, Dane?
Yeah, you're a little bit at a low frame rate, but you are still there.
Yeah. One second. Oh, I'm getting there. Everything takes a little longer today.
It just goes to prove how hard it is to break our control system.
Mm-hmm. So, one more try. Finally, so I will disable the public connection because I can't switch off that device, because otherwise I need to run downstairs to my camera setup. But I will just simply disable the connection. And what we will see in a second is that actually all of my devices lost the connection to the CCS1. First, actually, my application discover the server is red. It means, oh, there is no CCS1 anymore. We also see that the buttons turned off because they are actually also not connected to the CCS1 anymore. But here we still see an icon, which seems like there is still a connection. And that is correct. Because remember, the CCS1 does have 2 network connections, and the creative grading panel is directly connected to the camera. And the CCS1 is also connected to the same network. So they could still see the server, but they are not driven by the server whatsoever anymore. And I can still control my camera. So this is just to let you know if this icon is there on both sides, means I have my full connectivity. So enable this thing again. Crossing fingers, that's coming up now. Because it's so slow, is it? Ah, it's there. Can you see this, Dane?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Now with me, it's really frozen most of the time, so I'm sorry. Good. Come on. Okay, so how to actually configure the second one? Same like with the first one. We simply click on here. And now obviously we need to press this single button. 1, 2, 3, and it pops up and says camera number 6 with the user CGP train 1. And that is exactly the same line what we have here. So as you can see, I can now drive the two cameras, and I can also toggle between the two cameras. So I can do all of that stuff and anything else I like. Some customers actually want to have the ability to not using the preview buttons to switch between cameras. Then there is a little function which is called follow preview, which you can set to off. Then the preview button, no matter if you press them here or you press them here, are not forcing the creative grading application to follow. Right? Then you need to use the single button to toggle between the two cameras, or you simply use any of these other buttons over here, and automatically the right camera will be selected where you press the individual button. So, but if you do have a router control system hooked up directly and you want to have the preview button also that the application follows, you simply need to push this little icon here, put the tick box on, and then it follows. The next thing is, remember I said there is this camera 55. Let's pretend this is a beauty shot camera, and we don't need to control this camera constantly. But what you can do is you can park it here, and let's say I don't have enough space on my desk, but I want to use one of these panels to control camera 55 just for a short moment, and then I'm jumping back to my regular camera. That can also be done very simple by clicking on this icon and switch it over here. You see now it's 55. I would now drive camera 55. As you see on my picture below, nothing is happening. And when I'm done with my beauty shot camera, I'm switching back to my regular camera. And now I'm controlling my regular camera again, right? So you can be extremely agile by parking a camera, let's say for the halftime show, or one shot outside, or one shot on a different angle, or a beauty shot camera, or any other idea you like to have. You can also put on multiple instances the same camera. So if you, for instance, have a steady camera or a beauty shot camera or anything like this, which you like to share between your colleagues, then everyone can have this camera on their panel. There is actually not a limitation right now how many control panels actually driving or how many applications driving a camera, up to 5. So there is indeed a little limitation on the control panels, but on the creative grading application itself, you could actually have it even 10 times. That's important, for instance, for the engineer in charge, who probably wants to overlook all of the different cameras. So you can have multiple camera selections with multiple users. So this is how you actually do the camera and creative grading assignment to the creative grading application. And as said, as you can see here, when I press a button, it is actually following my assignment. But it's not actually happening on this second tablet. But what I can do is I can actually assign this panel to this application. 1, 2, 3. So and what happens now is when I press this button, you see my application on the tablet is now following, but not on the main screen anymore. So what happens? My colleague over here needs to have a 5 minutes comfort break and run into the restroom. And when I'm driving this particular camera with my long arm on his position, I want to see the values on my screen. So whenever I press something on his panel, it's changing on my screen. And when my colleague is coming back, he can actually go in here, click on this icon, and he can see that this panel is now used by the other user, which in this particular case is my name, Kevin. So I can say, take over, yes. And in this moment, you see, I'm driving my panel again and not my application anymore. So you can also be very agile by assigning control panels around. Good. Are there any questions? Anyone wants to shoot out right now before we dive into the operational bits and pieces? Good. Okay. Let's go. First of all, let's talk about some basics. You see over here, we actually have a bunch of buttons and they are reflected on the left-hand side as well. So we've got a light button, we've got a contrast button, we've got a color button, enhancement, and automatic. All of these categories do have subcategories. As you can see, light over here has main, path, and parameters. I'm using my mouse right now, but I can also drive the whole thing by using this button. Right? So if I want to go to contrast, I simply push on the contrast button. So I'm now on main, black, ni, gamma, HDR gamma, and I toggle through the entire list again and again, and it's rolling back to main. The same thing for color, the same thing for enhancement, the same thing for automatic settings. And then there is a second row of buttons. Number one is the home screen button. This one, Kevin. And that brings up actually the home overview. That is a general overview about the most important settings of each individual camera. And I selected the home button. And if I'm selecting another camera, you see it's jumping between the two cameras and shows me the different values of these two cameras, right? I could also press the home button here and then press the home button here. But it's more convenient to do it from here. There is another button, which is called diagnostics, which is next to this. And when I hit the diagnostics button, I've got an overview about the reference, temperature, the system setup, the lens which is used, the software revision which are installed, and the licenses which are installed on that particular camera. When I hit the icon again, I jump through the next page, right? So I can toggle through this entire list. And by the way, on all of the 100 series camera, so LDX 100, 150, you can see that the cameras do have actually a GPS reception. That means I can even see where the camera is physically positioned. And what you see here is actually the position of the camera, and it's actually shooting into this direction. So what you see is actually the grass area in this direction. For those of you who wants to know where that is actually Cologne and Frankfurt. And if I'm zooming further out, it's Germany, right? So for a REMI production, think about this. You want to see where the cameras are physically positioned. So this is camera 5, an LDX 100. Okay, I can zoom in here and I see exactly where that camera is. And that is about up to 6 meters in accuracy, right? If I would have multiple cameras having the GPS reception enabled, then I would see all of these icons all over the maps. Good. So following the buttons, then we've got a file folder button, which is here on the right-hand side, which opens up my scene files, and another feature which I explain in a few minutes. And in the center, we do have the free button. The free button is absolutely similar to what we used to have already in our regular OCP. So if I change something over here, obviously the iris is changing. When I hit the free button and I'm trying to do something, you see now nothing happens. So you can, for instance, put the iris in the center position. What you can do as well is you can do the fine adjustment for the lens control. If you have a close look to the display, you actually see that there is iris range and iris center, and they are tied to these two rotaries. So with my iris range, I can reduce the iris, worst case to 0. 0 means no control, so it doesn't have very much. So let's bring some control in here. 22, and I put the iris value somewhere where it works fine. And now you can see I only have a small area of controls, but extremely accurate and fine adjustments, right? So the other important thing you will find when you press the free button is you can always see what camera is connected, if there is an XCU connected, what is the CGP serial number, and which user you are connected to. So that's all visible on the free button. Then we've got 6 rotaries over here. I assume you can make a guess what they are all about when you see the colors. So red, green, and blue, they are actually, the lower portion is the black adjustment, and the upper area is the gain adjustment. So when I go to color, for instance, and I go to painting, and I adjust something here, you see I am adjusting the upper rotary. You can see that the red value is changing. If I would go to black adjustments, then I would see the black values changing. By the way, in the display, you always have this information also on here. For those of you who probably say, but I do not buy into the individual black value settings. I want to control flare instead, which this is a question about taste, and this is actually a question about how you learned to operate cameras. You can change the general behavior of this button by pressing the wrench and going to a setting over here, panel setting, which is called black pot. And now they are controlling flare. And you can see also you have flare values over here. So right now I would control the flare values of that camera, right? So this is important for you to know. If someone is changing this, that is important for you to understand that you do have this setting available. Good. Then we've got 3 buttons on the left-hand side. We've got a standard button, and with a standard button, you can recall a scene file, a factory or a customer scene file. So with this button, I can do a standard recall. The next button is actually bringing on bars or a sawtooth. And the third button you have seen I'm using already is actually a little bit of a setup page for the creative grading panel. So Dane directly recognized that I'm not running the latest software version of these panels, because what happens on my panel is I press the bars button, for instance, and you see bars comes up immediately. We changed the behavior of these buttons. So if you want to do anything related on these buttons, you need to press and hold these buttons for a few seconds. And you will actually get a little indication in the menu stating that you need to press this button for about 10 seconds. On the right-hand side, we've got two more icons which are lit over here. One item is actually the lock button. If I press the lock button, it lights up. And actually, you can imagine, I can do whatever I want. It is completely locked. There is no function available right now until I unlock this button again. Unlock this panel again, in fact. And then there is this little headphones. You might say, what is this? Is this to control my intercom? No, not yet. Let's see what the future will bring. At this moment in time, this is actually the call functionality. So in the old days, we used to have a call button. This is the call button to actually try to get the camera operator awake that you want something from him. Last but not least, on the, there are a few more buttons, Kevin. Get this done. Then you see a little area over here. And this area, most of the operators I gave some training to, they called this the virtual mouse. Because what I always see when someone touches for the first time, he's not looking into using it like an engine, like an operator. He's using the mouse all the time and trying to fiddle around inside the menu structure. But that's not the intention. The intention is that you are sitting here and you can drive almost everything from the application from here. You have seen how I can toggle through the menu structure, but how can I drive the individual items? So you see, there is a left and a right arrow. And when I press left, you see that this little blue bar went up here. I press right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. So you can always jump quickly to any function you like. And the rotary is then automatically attached to this function. So you can simply go here and control the iris if you want to. Or in worst case, when this thing does not react because our lovely colleague set this value to 0. Still, you can control the iris, even so that you can't control the iris from here anymore, right? Let's bring this back because before I get confused myself. So this is actually the virtual mouse, if you like, and the virtual mouse, or better, the navigation rotary and the arrows can have two colors. There are blue at this moment in time, and I will come back to the color in a few moments. Then we've got the preview and next button up here, and this preview and next button is actually to select the pages we were talking about. Remember, we have 3 pages, and as you can see, there are actually page number 2, page number 1, and page number 3. And we decided to also color code them, purple, blue, and green, to make this very obvious on which page we are. Good. So this is about the buttons. I'm missing one button. And what is this button all about? You have seen me using this single button all the time. And remember, Dane actually said earlier that we also have an MCP. In fact, every operator now has its own master controls unit, if you like, right? By simply using the multi button. And when you hit the multi button, you actually get an overview of all of your cameras which you have assigned to your work position. So camera 5 and camera 6. And you can see I can drive the cameras, right? I can also go through the list over here. And what I can do is I can, for instance, change an ND filter on this camera. Up, here we go. But I can also do this on all cameras or a selection of cameras. Now I bring all to 1/16 or 1/4. Or as you may can imagine, I can also, have you recognized that these rotaries turned green? Now they are blue. Now they are green. So I can go here and I can use this as an overall iris control. Does that make a lot of sense? Probably not. But let's say I go to my page number 1 and I've got my color temperature. Let's go to color temperature. And you see I've got my 2 cameras over here and I can individually control my color temperature, right? But if you are in an outside production and certainly a cloud comes along, you can of course try to dial in the color temperature individually for each camera. But what you can also do is you can simply link those features together. You see they're turning green again. And now, including their offset due to the lens, due to the different viewing angles, I can now adjust the color temperature of all of my cameras, or as an overarching engineer in charge, he can also select all cameras and can drive all cameras simultaneously. So all cameras actually visible in the system, up to 99 cameras at this moment in time, right? So that is the idea about the single view and the multi-view. And during setup phase, you can do so lovely things like, for instance, go through the diagnostics, for instance, to see if all of my cameras have a good transmission diagnostics, right? If everything is working fine. Remember, the compact camera don't have a CCU, no XCU, so you will not see any transmission data over here. If I would go to main, I could see if all of my cameras have a reference and if all of the other information are matching my expectations. So from an engineering point of view during the setup phase, you can be rather quick. What you can also do is simply, as a start-off point, go to the file management, select all cameras, and actually select factory recall and make a factory recall of all my cameras so that I can directly have a good start-off point. Or if you're in a studio environment and your engineering team, probably including yourself, came up with some specific settings where the matrix is probably different and the gamma curve is probably different and some other settings are slightly different, then you might want to recall a customer standard or you want to recall a scene file. We will talk about the scene files in a few minutes. So you can be extremely quick and agile with the setup of the system by simply using the single and multi button. You might have recognized I was explaining everything here, and that's reflected there. But on this side, we have one menu tree, which is not accessible from here. And that's the setup. The setup tree is obviously nothing you want to deal and fiddle around with during production. The setup is only interesting during the setup phase. So for instance, to check that all the cameras are on the right video mode, consider you get some loan cameras in, you rent something in, right? And you don't know where the settings are, just bring them all into the network and just take the multi-view instead of the single view. So you can have all of the camera information on a glance, immediately visible to you, so they don't need to actually fiddle around and try to understand why something is not working. Same with all of the sub context items which you will find here, right? So this is all in setup, and that's not accessible from here. So that is one of the reasons why we also say, even so that you might say, I can do everything individually. Yes, you can. But the great advantage is, if you have more than one camera, you are immediately quicker by using this way of controlling the cameras and to set up the cameras. Good. So coming back to the control panel, I want to show you another feature which I haven't showed you so far. So let's think about this. We actually have an entertainment show ongoing, or we are in the rehearsal and the setup phase of an entertainment show. So I want to check that the camera is in a good setting. So let me actually dial some settings in here. Obviously the color temperature is not good, so let's get the color temperature right, or better at least. It's getting a little bit dark outside. Oh, we can still deal with that, that's fine. And I want to actually do a little bit with the highlights over here. So to make this a little bit more nice. Up, yeah, so here we go. Right, so, and now we're fiddling around with the settings and someone says, no, I don't like the picture. I probably want to have it a little bit more cold. Or someone else says, nah, it needs to be way more in this direction. And let's get some more art included. This is more like on a desert or something. So you actually dial in some weird numbers. So you may have seen I was fiddling around with the settings. And then after a while, probably the director says, you know what, please stop all of this. The settings from 3/4 of an hour ago, they were just perfect. I loved them a lot. Can you dial them in again? And you're like, okay, have I made a scene, Shael? I actually don't recall. Have I written down what I have done? So here's the idea, what we introduced into the system. I pushed this button a few times. And in fact, I pushed the button every time I did a change. After I did a change, this button is called snapshot. With this snapshot button, I can open another page, which is under File. And here you will see I have my presets, which are my scene files, and I've got my snapshots. And what you see here is we do have 5 snapshots on this camera, which are all created in the last minute, right? So what I can do is I can tick this direct recall button and simply ask, was it this setting, or that setting, or this setting, or this setting, or probably that setting, right? So you can directly do, undo, and play with the light colleagues or play with the creative people to find the ideal settings for your show setup. And if you say, or the director or whoever actually makes the call says, this is exactly the settings I like, then we will come to the next button. And that is actually an icon over here, which is our share possibility. Because what you can do now is you can say, well, I have just used these settings over here, and I want to share them with all of my other cameras. Let's say this is your master camera, and you want to deploy the settings to, let's say, 10 more cameras. So you can simply click on this icon. Come on, thank you. And I select camera number 5. And just to show you, let's go to color, and you see camera number 5 is totally off from camera number 6 in literally a lot of settings. So for instance, if I go to my contrast HDR gamma settings, you can see the cameras are definitely off. So if I go to color, just to be directly back on that page. I go to share and I says camera number 5, that's my master camera. Here I dialed in all of the settings the way I like them. And then I can select all other cameras, which you might want to do or probably don't want to do. So you can also select each individual camera, which you like to deploy the settings to. And then they hit the share button. And then it will ask you, are you sure? And if you hit the yes button, which I will do in a second, then it would automatically deploy the settings to all other cameras you have selected. With one exception, that's the camera which is on air. The camera on air will obviously don't take the settings because it would directly be applied to the camera, which might mean that you will have a big jump on the picture if that camera is on air. There is actually a trick deep inside the system where you can actually untick this functionality so that you actually take this protection against some unwanted on-air behavior to off. Let's say if you're in the middle of a rehearsal or in a setup phase and someone else on the vision mixer is actually using your camera on a Kia with a DPE or DPM functionality and camera on air, camera off air, camera on air, and you're like, please, I need to set up my cameras. Don't touch this camera anymore. Let them do their thing. You can actually set this off, and I will show you in a second where that is. But let's hit the yes button, and it actually applies the settings. And here you see the color temperature, for instance, on both cameras are now equal to all of the other settings, similar, except HDR settings. And there is a specific reason for this, which I don't want to go too far into details, but these are two completely different types of cameras, and they behave a little bit different related to HDR. But that is something which we will discuss with a customer when he really buys the camera. So we will dive into this because it's a real thing about the different types of cameras. It's a little bit too much for a training purpose. However, let me show you quickly about this other feature, which I meant, which is called Telelog. And that is hidden in setup under signaling. And there is an icon called Telelog. That is per definition on, and you can toggle this to off. But be aware, if you toggle this to off and the camera is on air, you can still do scene file recall, standard recall. You are able to really screw up the picture. That's why we strongly suggest to leave this setting in on position all the time, right? Good. So I was able to create snapshots. And by the way, another neat feature which you can do is you can also rename those snapshots. So you can say, well, this is Shakira on stage, right? And this is, come up. U2, oh, obviously not. It's U2 on stage, for instance. And you can also protect these from getting overwritten. Then they will not disappear, at least not when you create more snapshots. If you want to keep them for longer, then you actually need to store them either into a preset or onto a USB memory drive. And the USB memory needs to be connected into the CCS1. On the creative grading panel itself, there is no USB. There actually is no memory at all available. That all actually goes via the CCS1. So you can have a USB thumb drive, like a USB memory stick, like a hard disk drive. There are other possibilities under consideration, which I don't want to highlight too much right now. But let's say I want to save this setting. So I hit the save icon here. I select my USB memory. And there are quite some folders in here. let's see if I actually have something over here. Let's go into my LDX. Subfolder. There is a pop idol already, but here this will be actually my music show setting. This is only a file comment. So this is not the file name. The file name is written down here. So if I hit the save button, it's now saved. And what I can do is I can recall this scene file anytime, or I can recall something else. And I can also load data from the USB memory directly into the camera. And how that works, a lot of people are asking me all the time. Let me explain. In the camera, we do have 4 scene files. Scene file 1 to 4. We now call them preset 1 to 4. And the preset is called, per definition from factory, scene file 1, 2, 3, and 4, as you can see here. But you can also give this thing any type of meaningful name. So if you are in a news studio and you're using the cameras in a news environment, why not call it 12 o'clock show or 4 o'clock news? So something which is more meaningful to you, right? If you want to load some settings into the system from outside, you can either actually select a preset, then I would actually load the settings into the preset, but they are not automatically enabled or applied. They are only stored in the camera and will stay there until the day you actually override them. Alternatively, you can also actually select the active settings, and that is really, as it's actually named, it's the actual active settings. So when I'm changing something related to my color, then the number 6 over here, sorry, U2 actually, in fact it is, because I'm on camera 5, U2 has now a changed parameters, but they are not stored because that is the last stored or last recalled scene file. So if I want to load something in here from a USB memory, I can hit the load button. I can go to Shakira. You can see on which type of camera this information is created, the scene file, when it was created. That's my comment so that I actually understand a little bit more about what this is all about. And when I hit the load button now on a active settings, you may have recognized it's immediately applied, right? So loading something in here is stored in the camera, but not applied. Loading something in here is immediately applied. And also here, you can only do this if the camera is not on air. One last thing about the snapshots. You may have recognized that before I started screwing up the pictures, I pressed this button over here some while back. And what this does is actually, it creates a snapshot over all of my cameras, because you can see